British employers are concerned about the sudden lack of corona regulations. They denounce open liability issues in Boris Johnson's new living with COVID strategy. The Prime Minister refers to common sense and praises Germany as a role model, but obviously he hasn't understood the German thing. At the end of the COVID restrictions in Great Britain, employers were concerned that there were no clear regulations and rules on how to deal with illnesses in the future. Prime Minister Boris Johnson's approach to scrapping free COVID testing and removing mandatory quarantine in cases of illness risks creating a legal vacuum, warned Matthew Fell, policy officer at the Confederation of British Industry, the CBI, and he did that in the Financial Times. On February 21st, Johnson announced as part of the new Living with COVID strategy that from February 24th, those suffering from COVID will no longer be obliged to isolate themselves as before. After a positive test, it's recommended to stay home for at least 5 days and avoid contact with others. Contact tracing will be discontinued, however. Anyone who has had contact with a COVID case no longer has to carry out daily tests. A sick person no longer has to provide the employer with any information about their state of health. The British Chamber of Commerce also emphasized that employers need very clear recommendations for action. It must be clear how best to take care of the health of employees and customers. For small and medium-sized businesses in particular, many of which are still grappling with the financial fallout from the pandemic, clarity, guidance, and support are essential in the coming weeks to enable them to operate safely, said Alan Thomas, CEO of insurer Simply Business. So far, it's unclear, among other things, which liability risks arise when sick people insist on coming to work. This could become all the more an issue as, with immediate effect, financial support for a one-off payment of £500 in the event of illness for low-income earners will be abolished. Associations and companies complain that too much is left to the individual in the new model, which strives to restore the situation before the pandemic. But without free tests, clear rules, and in view of new rules on sick pay, many employees would also have to keep an eye on financial considerations. In his announcement, Johnson referred to the sense of responsibility and common sense of the citizens and cited Germany as a role model. I've heard over the past few years that we have a habit of rushing back to work or coming to work even though we're not feeling well. And that compares to Germany, for example, where I'm told they are a lot more disciplined about not going to work sick. But the comparison with the situation in Germany lags behind. Full continued payment of wages for 6 weeks in the event of illness is one of the most generous rules among the industrialized nations in the OECD, and we have that here in Germany. Great Britain, on the other hand, is one of the tail lights. The law there is paying £95.35 a week, less than a quarter of the average wage. In the first 3 days of illness, there is no entitlement to wage payments. This rule was lifted at the beginning of the pandemic, and the salary continued to be paid immediately after sick leave. With the new COVID strategy, the country is returning to the old rule. Although a number of employers are paying from day one, unions warn that around 8 million workers will be affected by the decline in sick pay. Sadiq Khan, Mayor of London, has described the strategy of living with COVID as the privilege of the better off. After all, the government has announced revised rules to secure jobs before COVID. They are to be included in the standard recommendations on health and safety at work. However, this can be expected in April at the earliest. And I'll see you in my next video. Bis gleich.